You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
There have to be survivors in Washington. They have more sophisticated shelters than this one. There have to be people in those shelters who know about us, who know where we are. With no radio contact, they'll come looking for us.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect and discuss classic horror films, both old and new. I have the distinct privilege, this podcast, to talk with one of the stars of George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, with Laurie Cardille, and in particular she played Sarah, the lead protagonist in the film. So this is really quite exciting to kind of talk to somebody who was literally in the guts of the movie the whole way through. Welcome aboard, Laurie, and thank you for coming on board to have a chat with us.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Really, my son-in-law Dana Ashbrook was just in Australia doing a tour with the Twin Peaks people. Yeah.
Oh wow! Yeah, of course, that's right. Yeah. I saw that advertised, and I was, if I wasn't kind of inundated with stuff at that moment, I was totally going to go to that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking with you. I'm a huge fan of Twin Peaks.
That's great. You did a great job. They did a great job this year. Yeah, terrific.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, look, yeah, thank you. Like I said, so one thing that I probably should add is that obviously we're based here in Australia, as you pointed out. So a lot of the time we're trying to gear stuff towards the Australian audiences. So we've always been a bit focused on Australian horror on occasion. But obviously we open up that umbrella to talk about the big movies that had an impact, which obviously Day of the Dead and Romero's work did. So the... if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just kind of, it might sound a bit odd, but I'm going to just start by talking about your father. Only because he was known more so, I guess, in the States, but, you know, known as Chili Billy. He was a popular broadcast personality in the States. Right. So were you aware of how high his profile was growing up? And I guess the big question is do you think that that had an impact in your decision to go into the entertainment industry at all?
Well, I was growing up. My father lived in Pittsburgh. It's in Pennsylvania at the time, and my mother was in Erie, Pennsylvania. They were together, but they were living separately. It's a long story, but
sure.
So anyway, I was back and forth living in Pittsburgh and back to Erie, and then when I was about 10 or 12 years old, I moved back to Pittsburgh here, and I had no idea that my dad was so well known because it was local in Pittsburgh at that point, and it was just, it was just shocking. And I remember to me, he was Dad, and he was like an Elvis to people.
Yeah.
It was shocking, but
So, do you think that? So, did you think that led anyway into you moving into drama at all?
It's funny because my
even
dad,
subconsciously,
Sure, I loved talking to my father about the business of television and film, and I remember at our dinner tables, just had a lot of questions. I was interested in that. I was never interested in fame or the kind of popularity that he had because I wasn't that comfortable with that part of it.
Sure.
So I was more interested in sort of the art and the behind the scenes work of it. Uh-huh. And it's not until I was in high school that I started doing a little bit of theater in high school. And excuse me, at the school I went to. And so Carnegie Mellon is a very good drama school. It's actually George Romero went there. And my daughter went there. Actually, she went there and she spent a semester at NIDA in Australia.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Kate Rogel. But so I auditioned to get into Carnegie Mellon, and I got in, and I had a really great focus on Shakespeare. It's like NIDA, classical theater.
Yep.
So there was even a point where I thought, well, my dad was like an entertainer, and I was like, an artist, darling. But he taught me so much, and I loved the smell of a good television studio. And I used to come up and watch him film on Schiller. And I went to the opening of Night of the Living Dead. In fact, we're celebrating 50 years of the movie of Night of the Living Dead.
I know, how awesome! Yeah, that was another reason why we're doing these kind of nods to Romero as well, particularly because of the 50 years this year. Anyway, so carry on.
But I actually went to the opening.
That is awesome.
And we're having the whole month of October in Pittsburgh is dedicated to George.
Nice.
So we're kicking it off. We're having things at the museum and at highbrow discussions and zombie walks and all kinds of things all month. But there's going to be a premiere of the movie that had just been redone by MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York, and they redid it. Not they didn't redo it, but they fixed the film, and it's beautiful. I saw it in New York, and so they're going to be showing that, and I'll be there. But I was there when I was young. I was 14, and I was so afraid. I hated horror movies. I hated watching my dad's show.
Yes.
And I remember standing in the back of the lobby because the movie freaked me out. I mean, it was so frightening. Of course, eating other people. It was so revolutionary at the time. Mm-hmm. So yes, and a long way around about answering your question. Yes, my father did influence me in so many ways, just in interest in theater and film and television. Mm-hmm.
Because he had a role within Night of the Living Dead as well, didn't he? As one of the promoters or something, video promoters.
He was himself. He was Bill Cardille, and he was the announcer.
Yeah,
he played himself. And as a matter of fact, George and his friends, they would watch, when he was in college, would watch my father's show. And when they had the idea to make Night of the Living Dead, he went to my father and said, look, we're making this little movie. We'd like you to be a part of it. And George until he died, as a matter of fact, when we were in New York, he credits my dad with the beginning of his career and the start of his career and the success of Night of the Living Dead at that time because of my father plugged the heck out of it. He was talking about it, showing parts of it. It was a big deal. Yeah. And he was so popular at the time, and that's how it started taking off. So it was quite moving to when George, I was there, and my father had just passed away. And George said that in the beginning to the audience before they showed the film, and it was quite a moment for me.
Yeah, I bet. Mm-hmm. There's a few questions I have around Romero and stuff, but we'll kind of get to that in a second. Because I did notice, I have read your book, which we'll come to as well in a bit more detail. But I noticed in there, drama wasn't initially your first calling, though. You had a more drive towards religion, which had a big influence on your life. So I'm just wondering, how did you transition from this kind of desire to kind of feed the religious part of yourself into acting? How did that come about?
Well, I did have, because I was living in Erie, and my father was in Pittsburgh, and my mother was ill during that time. So I was brought up Catholic, and my grandmother was devout and very non-judgmental, fabulous woman from Poland. And she would take me to mass, and it filled a void for me. It taught me a certain reverence for something greater than myself. And it sort of saved me through childhood. I was sexually abused during all that time by my uncle, and that's what the book's about. Yeah. But so that religion and spirituality were a big part of my life. I wasn't going in to become a nun, although I did remember thinking when they used to come into the classroom, who wants to be a nun? Who wants to be a priest? And the kids would raise their hand. I wanted to be a saint. I didn't even want to. I would talk about my ego. I would go right to the stage. So I tried to
go straight up to that level.
Right. I don't need to be a saint or nun. A nun or a priest. But anyway, but that was just a part of my life. It was never a vocation. I liked helping people and, volunteering and doing good work, but it was never of the Catholic Church.
No. So go on, sorry.
No, I just became interested. I actually was tall and thin. I did some modeling, of all things, in Pittsburgh, and I would do runway work. And so they, people, I was 15 maybe, and there were a lot of older women. And I remember thinking, I was sort of adopting the feel of the clothes, and I took on a character sort of, and I found that I liked that. Then when I found out Carnegie Mellon was one of the best universities and the conservatories of theater, that's why I thought, I'm going to try that. And therefore, I just love theater so much. So.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I have a theatre background myself, and there is something, I haven't done it in a long time now, but there is something about treading those boards and kind of, slipping into another character's skin.
It was easier to be another character for me, especially, with all the emotions I had growing up. I'm rather shy as a person. But when I was on stage or performing, it's a whole different ballgame because I'm not quite myself,
Yeah. No, I can identify with that. So, like, before you landed the role of Sarah in Day of the Dead, you were fortunate enough to land a few TV roles. How did they compare to working on a feature, which you would come to do? And what experience did that allow to bring with you when you did come to play the role of Sarah?
Oh, thanks. That's a good question. I moved to New York. I moved to New York. It was 1976 at the time. Graduated from CMU, and I was lucky enough to land at the time a soap opera called The Edge of Night. It was one of the older soap operas, and it's a great learning ground for a young actor. You have to learn quickly. You have to adopt a character that goes through many different things. I was one of the running characters, and I learned how to learn quickly, and it was a great experience for me in many different ways. And I did theater then also in the evenings if I had, play. I ended up doing some Broadway work and did another soap. I didn't want to get stuck in the soap opera world because, I had the experience. I didn't need to stay in it. I had broader interests. And so then I did a lot more theater. I did nighttime television, a show called The Equalizer. I did a lot of theater, regional theater, Trinity Rep in Providence, and and a lot of theater in New York. So
So that, I guess there's I think I mentioned this a bit later on, but I'll drop it in now because with the role of Sarah, and what's I find particularly strong about your performance is the naturalism that comes with it. It feels natural. She feels natural. And I think that's probably, just hearing what you're saying, that sounds like a testament to a lot of the work you had done prior to playing the role of Sarah had an impact on you.
I take that as a compliment. Thank you. It's funny. I was doing a play, how I met George. I had known George because he knew my father, and I didn't, they didn't hang out, but they were friends in the industry and, very fond of each other. So all these years later, I was doing a play called Reckless by an American playwright, Craig Lucas. And it's a famous play now, but at the time it was a brand new play. And the character that I played was a comedy, kind of serious, sad, complicated comedy. Actually, Mia Farrow played the part in the movie. But when we were creating it, the character's on stage the whole time, practically. And that's where George and his producer from Laurel Entertainment came. They were in the audience, and we went out afterwards, and all the connections. And he said, "I'm writing something. I'd like you to be do this part." So it was pretty exciting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the next step with that? Were you invited to audition for the role of Sarah, or how did you finally kind of cement that role?
Yeah, he kept writing it. He wrote the first script, and it was a different script. It was a lot more. There were a lot more special effects and things blowing up, and it was a very expensive script. And so I remember Sarah. The character was a good character, but not as good as it was in the end. And then, of course, they wanted it to be cheaper, so he was more than character driven. And actually, he just offered me the part, and I actually helped him audition for all the other characters, which was something else. Because I had a body of work at that point, and
Sure.
it was lovely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting in itself. I mean, like even that direction alone, because like for me, I always am drawn more to character, I guess, in films. So when I can see that there's been a lot of character development, that automatically intrigues me when I watch the films. And one thing about Day of the Dead is that you can tell there's a lot of interplay going on between all of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's had a lot of detail around them. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, oh, absolutely, it's great for an actor, but the audience didn't like it when the movie came out. So the audience, expected something like Dawn of the Dead, which was a great fun movie, but it was not the same movie, and so there was this expectation, and they were very disappointed. I mean, the audience at the time. So. And there's always that controversy between, dawn and day and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right. It's
they're all good in their own way. They're just different films.
Exactly. And I think, well, like now you look back and Day has had its own cult following in its own right, so it's, and I think people have kind of slowly identified with it or connected with it on a different level and appreciated the movie for what it is. I mean, it's the movie that's had, of all the trilogies, it's the one that's had the most remakes, which I think says a lot about that film. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
it's like, well, there's obviously something that's pulling people to want to recreate that film. So, I mean, obviously, you mentioned about Night of the Living Dead and being at the premiere, but how aware of Romero's previous work were you kind of coming into Day of the Dead?
Well, I was aware of George's. I didn't like horror movies at the time.
Yeah.
But I was. I never understood why people like to be frightened. I had a sort of a psychological makeup from my abuse growing up, and I had a lot of anxiety and fear in me anyway until I dealt with all that. But so I never understood the excess of getting afraid, because I had a lot of things I had to deal with. But so it wasn't my first genre that I would be interested in, But I did know that George was a wonderful filmmaker, and he did interesting things. And I liked the fact that he was so cutting edge and sort of ahead of his time with each film that he did do. That was exciting to me. And that's what happened. I think with Day also, it was ahead of its time, and that's why people found it later. A little bit later. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. So what was it actually like working for Romero on set? I mean, I've heard that he often allowed actors to come up with their own motives or actions on set. There was a bit more kind of freedom with creativity. What is that? Was that true with you, or did you experience?
He was great. He was great. I was taught as an actor, and I'm sure you were too, is that you always honor the writing. You don't change anything unless you're given the permission by the director and what it feels like on the set. And George gave such a wide permission for us, but I was pretty classic in that way that I would, a few things I would mess around with, but I trusted George's writing. I trusted him and his vision. So, but he was very loose on the set. He was extremely professional, but we had a lot of fun. We had a great time together. I mean, we were in this cave for 3 months, and it was long. We were all sick.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I stuff I've read like about him has been incredibly warming. Like he's from what I've read, he was a very approachable, personable kind of person.
Absolutely, so kind.
Yeah, which would have obviously had a huge flow-on effect on set, having somebody of that character, to drive it. Yeah,
you're like family. You became a family truly all through life. As a matter of fact, my dad was like that. My dad was meant to be well known, and because he loved people so much, he was so good with people, and George was the same. He had a lot of compassion, as my father did, and that has been carried on, I think, through. Well, I know from Dad into my family, but for George into his family and to his fan base, as my father's too. And so you felt that if people would wait in line for a long time to get George's autograph because, he gave so much time to you when you got to meet him,
Yes.
He's a good man. He really cared for what you had to say, as I do. I meet people, I have to say.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. I think it's integral, really. Like, there's not a lot. I'm not going to go off on that massive a tangent, but I feel like it's something that is a bit remiss today, is that people don't take that time.
I know.
So,
I see
do you know what I mean?
it, and it's really sad. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were your fondest memories of life actually on set? And there's a double part to that question, because Tom Savini, who became so well known in the effects department, and particularly his collaboration with Romero, did you have much interaction with him at all on set as well?
Well, with Tom, I wanted to be one of the boys because they had so much fun.
Yeah, I bet.
They were having such a good time. The cave was a strange thing. There were these rooms inside the cave, like these offices. I mean, the walls, some of them were finished and they were concrete, and there were rooms, but some of them were like rocks. And where we shot the film was in the cave itself. So we would have to take a little go-kart and go to where we were shooting. But when we were waiting around, we were where Tom was with the crew, doing the makeup with Greg Nicotero and everybody. And they would always be laughing and having a blast. I was so concentrated on this part. I really, it was hard to, I wanted to be with them because I'm really what we call in Pittsburgh a jag-off. There's this Pittsburgh thing called Pittsburgh jag-off, which is sort of a camaraderie, a playfulness, heckling each other, and but I felt a responsibility too, because the part was so large, and I felt this sort of heaviness on my shoulders to make it right, whatever George wanted.
Yeah, that I can understand that too. Like that actually flows on quite well to my next question as well, because Sarah's role, like her character, is an intriguing one, because she's not only is she only the token female, but also she's the heart of the movie and the voice of reason through it. So what was the direction you were given in creating her role with that in mind? Because there's one point where she nearly loses it, she nearly breaks down, and it's quite a poignant moment in the movie, because you, as a audience watching that, go, no, if you lose it, what hope is there? Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think, what when I was working, I planned it out. I'd never done film a role in a film before as large as Sarah. And so I never shot out of sequence or anything. And I was used to doing the preparation that an actor does. And I had to think, well, where, the arc of the character, and at what point. And it's funny because, we all sublimate and have to get through things in life by just holding it together. And I think Sarah had to just hold it together. But I do believe that in some ways, her most human and touching and actually a moment of strength was when she did break down. Because I think after one breaks down, you get to build yourself up again with a whole new insight to life and a new compassion for people and a different way to look at things,
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Needed to see that humanity in her too, and that fight for survival kick in at that point as well. There's also, I mean, you were saying there was a bit of you were wanting to be one of the boys as well, because what's also interesting about Sarah being, like, I guess the center point, the kingpin of character, is that she has like 4 massively significant key relationships in the movie. One being like the first we kind of really get to know is her boyfriend, Private Miguel Salazar, but she also has her professional relationship with Dr. Logan, her ongoing conflict with Captain Rhodes, and her almost spiritual relationship with John. How did you go about balancing these relationships, when you're, in order to portray the role of Sarah?
Oh, well, it just was written there, honestly. I mean, it was there. It was just there. I don't know what more to say. That, she was a complicated character, even though at times I thought, oh my God, she's going to come off one-dimensional. I was worried about that because of that whole aspect of holding her together,
Yeah, yeah.
So I was scared that I was like maybe pigeonholing her, but I realized that she's just building that tension, and she had, so much more to her. And I wanted to give her a depth of character that I hope eventually, came off in the film. And so therefore all those different, relationships shows the breadth of the writing, the breadth of George's character, and what I was able to bring to it thanks to George.
Yeah, for sure. So like towards the end of the movie, I mean, it could be argued that the ending of this movie is slightly open to interpretation. At least that's what I found when I revisited it more recently, especially when you compare like Sarah's opening scene and the ending scene, because there's a almost dreamlike quality to both aspects.
Right.
What were your thoughts on that? Did you feel it was an open-ended, dreamlike ending? Or was it meant to be kind of played straight up that these people are free and they're out and ready to embrace whatever's out there in the wider world?
Right. For me, I mean, it felt like it really did happen, and it was not a dream. And it sometimes they booed at the end. The people did not like that. They didn't want to be left with that ambiguity, because they wanted to, settle this, because I'm anxious still about this whole thing, these zombies and what's going on and what happened. But that was kind of brilliant of George to let it open-ended, to make you think, I'm always curious about how it would be to get the three characters that survived at the end, to do a film with them, the three of us, as to what happened all these years later,
Yeah, that would be interesting to see, because and you're right about. I mean, it's funny how people, audiences would have reacted to that, because particularly when you do compare it with Dawn of the Dead, because there's a very similar ending in the sense that it is open ended. You have two two characters that are flying into the unknown, and not knowing what lies ahead. But that to me is, it reflects life. We don't know what's going to be down the track. Like these, we've been, because they've opened up this. Romero, has opened up this insight into this group of characters and just shown this one moment in time. And I guess that's what's great about having it feel so open ended, is that we then go, well, I wonder how that dynamic would work. And what will they face down the track? It's interesting. So,
don't you think? Excuse me, but also just the fact that George gave the audience the respect that really to figure out what it meant to them. What does this mean to you? So there's like this a sort of a self-analysis about things. It's pretty amazing what he did.
I absolutely. I'm having a great deal of fun going back over his collection of works at the moment and revisiting them again. And I find with his movies, like every time you watch them, you notice something a little bit different, which is again testament to what he did as a director. So after Day of the Dead had hit, you, from a career point of view, you did actually work on another horror classic. I know you were saying you were never that drawn to horror, but you did work on the TV show Tales from the Dark Side. What was that like? Did working on that with people on that, were they expecting you to come with that from your experience with Day of the Dead with a slight expectation of you?
No, I think, it was the same. It was Laurel Entertainment. They were the producers of the show. And the character that I played was really very different. She was completely, I don't know, maybe insane.
Yes.
It was Florence Bravo was the name of the character of the show. And it's a ghost story, and it's very different, and the character is very different. I think it was just you worked for us on this movie, or would you do this one? And it was George's series. That was a series of sort of like Twilight Zone in the horror genre.
Yes.
And it was great to do. I enjoyed it. But of course, like with television, it's so quick. You know, you get take one, okay, one more take, that's it, and then you move on. So we were so
Yeah.
used to with George and really exploring and getting more takes, and that was kind of fun. That was wonderful. So it was great. A good, another wonderful experience.
Sure. So, as I said, I always thought your performance as Sarah was, as I said earlier on, very solid and had this naturalistic feel about it. And yet, you're beyond that period, as I said, with Tales of the Dark Side. Your time in front of the camera, at least, started to dwindle not long after that, which felt a shame from somebody when you kind of review your performance. It feels solid. It feels like you had quite a strong career, or should have had a strong career ahead of yourself on camera. Was this a conscious decision on your part? I mean, where did you lead to that, like beyond that?
Well, first of all, you have to remember that in those days, even my agent, doing a horror film was not the best thing that they thought for your career. Although,
sure,
it was now, of course, and it's like the thing. But and I knew how wonderful the part was. But despite that, I did do more theater after that, and and I think that also in those days, I eventually my daughter, when I was making Days, she was turned a year old. She actually walked on the set when we were making Day of the Dead.
Okay,
It wasn't until like 3 years later that I had my son. 4 years later, and at that point, I had established my career enough. I thought, we thought, because when I did Day, we were living in New York, and we got a sense when we came back to the Pittsburgh area what it was like to have both sets of grandparents for our children. And I had done a lot. I enjoyed my work. I loved my work. But when I started having children, I felt like a half-assed mother or a half-assed actress. You know what I mean? I was on set and in those days, they didn't really incorporate your children into your work. That was like, I remember my agent saw me a week after I gave birth to my daughter and said, "Oh my God, you look so tired." I said, "Well, I just had a baby." I'm a woman. We have babies. And, so I made a decision to move back to Pittsburgh with my husband and my kids, and it's a good thing I did. I loved my work. I ended up doing some wonderful plays in Pittsburgh at this place called the City Theater. As a matter of fact, when you said about naturalistic acting, there was a man named Mladen Kislov, who was he was a very famous theater director from Bulgaria. He was teaching at Carnegie Mellon, and I did this play called 70 Scenes of Halloween, and it was very naturalistic, really interesting, kind of complicated play. And he had us all go to tour in Bulgaria to show American acting as far as the naturalness of that kind of style of acting, and it was really cool. But that's what made me think it. But I did give away, like, I did put aside the business, and that was sad. That was hard for me because I loved the work so much, but I had to face my past. I had to work on the issues I told you that gave me panic attacks and things that were frightening, and that had to do with my uncle, his abuse of me as a child. And I would never change anything because my life has really been a rich life, and I can still, I'm helping taking care of my mother at the end of her life. But I live in New York also. We have a place there because our children live there, and they're fantastic. And, I would go back into my work just being an old woman. I think being an actor, it doesn't matter what you look like or what age you are. You're always, you have the same ability. You want to express yourself. And what I did was I'm a photographer also. I love doing it not as, so I do installation art, and that's what is helping me with my creativity here. And a lot of it had to do with my suffering as a child, a lot of my art. Yeah. And so that's sort of helped me with not doing the acting, I sort of that aside, raised my kids and wrote the book and, continued to do my art as I still do today.
Yeah, well, I mean, art does feature predominantly in the book, and I guess that's coming to my next question as well, because at the turn of the century, you would go on to release the book we're talking about, and it's entitled "I'm Going to Tell an Offbeat Tale of Survival," and in which you disclosed that you were a victim of child abuse, as you mentioned previously in our chat. What prompted you to then, at that point in time, tell this very personal, revealing story about yourself, and what impact did that have on your life in doing that as well?
Thank you. I think it was the rage that I felt inside. Actually, it's such a long story that I'm thinking of writing a book about just how it all happened, because I could write about real life horror and then the movie horror and sort of put it together, because there's a real story that goes about around this. I remember when I was doing The Edge of Night, I was playing an ex-porno queen with a heart of gold. And what happened was you always knew 2 weeks in advance what the script was and what was going to happen for the audience. And I remember I was having so many panic attacks, because what happened was this character, my pimp or whatever, was going to kill me, he was raping me, and I was then therefore going to kill him. Yeah. And my character, it was really a cool character. Winter Austin was her name. And I was so freaked out, and I didn't realize it was like hitting me unconsciously with what had happened to me. Yeah. So there was that intertwining through life that, really was very painful periods. And finally, when I decided to deal with it, was in 1988, 1987. I went after my uncle with the licensing bureau and in Pennsylvania, because he was my doctor too. Yes. And I stumbled upon this thing where the FBI called me. It's a long story, but my uncle, he said, "Look, you don't go after him now. You have a civil case. You can, go after him then with a civil case. But he is being investigated." And it turned out that my uncle turned state's evidence against other doctors where they were exchanging drugs for sex. And that was in 1988 in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so I ended up trying a civil case. But in those days, the laws just weren't there. And I had wonderful people around me. And so fast forward to this time in the Me Too movement that's happening here in America. Yes. That's happening in Pennsylvania, all the abuse that's coming out here in the States, especially Pennsylvania. And I was able to make a report to the diocese and to the state's attorney general about my uncle, who's now dead, but he did work for the diocese. He would, be a doctor for the schools. And so I'm involved with them now, talking to them about that. And so I'm sort of back involved in trying to help people and trying also to see if there are other victims of his. Yeah. It was a long process, but it was a very painful process. But it gave me myself again. I can watch horror movies again. I'm a full person, and I did survive it. So that's why it's an Offbeat Tale of Survival. Yeah, I was a zombie killer, heroin on stage, right?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's interesting the parts that you were then playing when you broke through, so to speak, in film, are these kind of strong women who are surviving. Particularly when you look at Day of the Dead, to echo back to that, you're the token female in this, surviving against essentially a lot of egocentric, testosterone-fueled men. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you this character, at least from a film point of view, is who you are known for. And it's almost like what am I trying to say? It's almost like this was meant to be. It was a calling for you to play that kind of character, whether you knew it or not at the time. Because with drama, there's a sense of catharticism that comes with it anyway. And so it's almost, I'm speaking on your behalf, so just tell me if I'm going down the wrong channel with this. But
no, you're absolutely 100% right. When I was talking earlier in the interview about Sarah's character and how she, her strongest moment was when she broke down. I personally experienced that after Day of the Dead, when I had to confront all this. I had to break down my my way of holding things, the way of disassociating, and to see the truth of what was happening and as it was happening. And so it was a very lonely time. It's scary. I didn't know. I thought I had lost my mind, quite honestly, because nobody was coming out about child abuse in those days.
Yeah.
And but it all worked out in the end. And I guess I have the fight in me. Thank God that I had the fight in me so that I can help other people. And then I, as I said, have a rich, full life now, and the respect and love of my children, my husband, my family.
Yeah, that's right. So, and so what? Another thing I just wanted to touch on with the book is the I guess the mode in which you deliver the narrative, because it's an incredibly earnest and frank portrayal of the ordeal that you suffered, but there you do also throw in this kind of offbeat sense of humor that runs through it, which at first, when you first start to read it, might seem to jar with what the subject matter is about, but actually what it does is shine a light on your own personality, and perhaps even more so how you were able to deal with it.
Wow,
can you tell us a bit about that decision?
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do.
So can you tell me about the decision behind that? Because obviously it was an executive choice on your part to go with that style.
What happened, Paul, was as I was remembering, and I would be up at night. I'd be like, I'd come down. I couldn't sleep. I would do these drawings. I would write these little essays, sort of like throwing up on the page what I was going through, and it was taking pictures, and it was sort of learning about what was inside me while I was doing this. And I realized at the end of this that there was something I could share with people. So it shows the mind of somebody going through that process. And yes, I think black humor, dark humor, I mean, that is the thing. See, even horror movies, it's the way we deal. That's why people love horror movies, and also for me, it was I always had dark black humor and irreverent humor. It's sort of what got me through. And even though I'm talking serious now, but I have a really dark humor. And as you can see in the book, and I really appreciate you picking that up. I really do. And because it was a stream of consciousness. It was,
sure.
Everything was coming up. And I appreciate that you got that, because it's sort of like a performance piece, in a little book.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's okay. Yeah, well, it's interesting. And I guess it lends itself also, because you've mentioned as well how you've done a lot of art installation pieces. So, and you telling us now that it was this kind of flow of conscious thought that you were putting out there, that the two almost kind of synchronized in a way, in that you could actually easily see it as an art installation, transformed from the book into that kind of medium, in a way. So you've since returned to acting again, on screen. Recently, you have starred alongside fellow Day of the Dead star Terry Alexander, as well. So what was that like, kind of teaming back up with him again? Was that were you instantly thrown back into old times and catching up with him, or?
Which one? What are you talking? Which project is that?
So sorry, excuse me. So that
That's
was there was I've got it, and maybe IMDb's wrong, but it's a film that looks like it's a short film called was it The Last Call, which actually, according to this, is in post-production phase. So maybe it's even that you didn't share on screen time with Terry.
Well, you know what?
He's in there.
I think no. You know what? That is a movie that. Okay, I know the connection. I'm sorry. Yes.
No,
I did not. I did a voiceover for that film.
Okay.
So I wasn't on stage. On film with him. But
that's a shame.
The director of the film, I'm working on a project with him. I can't really talk about along with Jarlath and Terry, and so he's a young, wonderful filmmaker. That's the thing about, people that have seen your work when they were younger and they've grown up to be these filmmakers, and it's just wonderful. And Vinny Petrosini is a producer, and anyway, he did this film. Yes, in fact, this film is going to be very good. The one that Terry did. I did another film with these people that did with Vinny, and it was going to be a series about a cult in the mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was really a great experience. I also produced with my husband a movie called Lightweight. It was short, and it did win a lot of nice awards. I was in that with my daughter and my son-in-law, Dana Ashbrook.
Yes.
And like I said, young directors are coming to me and asking me to do certain things, and I'm considering them, and it's cool.
Yeah,
Really?
that is. I mean, you're right. There's I guess because there's been not only has there been a resurgence in horror, thanks to big hit and kind of more highbrow kind of films like Hereditary more recently, but A Quiet Place and things like that, which is helping, I guess, keep that mill turning over.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah,
Let me tell you, Marcus Slabine is the name of the director I'll be working with. Did the movie with Terry.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But like people like Marcus, though, as you were saying, like were also heavily influenced by the films that they grew up with. We're talking like that classic kind of 80s period where there was a lot of actually interesting, like a lot of freedom was going around that because it was when VHS was going gangbusters and people were renting these movies, and so there was a bit more kind of license for creativity and freedom with making these movies, I feel. And it feels like these modern filmmakers are now turning to the likes of John Carpenter and these kind of people that really influence them, and we're seeing that now. So it kind of makes sense how there are these kind of movies coming to the forefront, which is interesting. It's an interesting
love it,
time. Yeah, for sure.
I love the movie Let the Right One In. That was a beautiful film.
So good. So
good. Such a good film. So many wonderful films now.
There is. There's a great little movie that's just kind of come out over here, Australian movie called Rabbit. Yeah, and it does deal with cults and psychological experimentation and things like that. It's a little bit of it's potentially going to be one of those movies that's going to go a little bit under the radar, I think, because it's a low budget independent film, and
which is sometimes the best.
Yeah. But it's I caught it just recently, and it's fascinating. So if it does kind of get statewide release your way, definitely check it out because it's interesting. So what was it like? What's I guess just we're coming to the conclusion of our interview. But what was it? What's next on the horizon for you now? Then, like, you were talking about how there's a lot going on for the Night of the Living Dead celebrations in Pittsburgh at the moment. But what's going on for you from a career point of view? What are you looking at next on the agenda?
As I said, I live in New York as well as Pittsburgh, and I'm things like are coming to me, sort of like George did in the day, and I don't want to have to scrape and scrounge and, beg for jobs and get into the mainstream of this, the business, and can be so silly. People don't know you or whatever that. It's more about the art of making good film for me. Yes. Always has been. And so I'm just wide open. I am continuing, hopefully, to carry my dad and George's legacy forward and talk about them and show up wherever anybody wants me.
Yes.
And, I continue. I think I'm going to write this book. I will probably do some more film. And if theater presents itself, I'll consider that. And I'm open. I will always do photography. My son is a producer, a sports producer. He has his own company now, but he wrote for he was a producer at HBO Sports. He won an Emmy at the age of 23.
Wow.
And Jake Rogal is his name. And my daughter is this magnificent, multi-talented actress, artist. Her name is Kate Rogal. She's and writer. So she's just so much talent. So they're creative. It's always being creative. It's really the thing. If you just do what you love and what comes your way, you just sort of consider and, feel for what, if this is right, then you do it. So I don't plan it. I just show up where I think I should be. And right now it's with my mother by her side, helping her at the last stages of her life.
For sure.
And, and being with my children and, looking at the projects that are being presented to me and hopefully working them into my life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. It's been really, really great kind of getting some insight into, obviously, around Day of the Dead and everything surrounding that. And I do wish you success in whatever project comes forward for you. The book sounds interesting. Like, I'm reminded of Alfred Hitchcock, who always said that there was a fine line between horror and comedy. And would always play his horrors as comedies. That's in his mind sight. So there is something about that and dealing with the horrors with a light-hearted approach, because I guess that's what kind of keeps us on the right side of sanity.
Exactly. Exactly.
So but look, absolutely a massive pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking some time out and talking on Surgeons of Horror.
I'm very moved by your knowledge, by your kindness, and also by your understanding of especially the book. Thank you.
Oh no, it was a great read, actually. I only literally stumbled across it because when we were gearing this up to, with the potential of chatting with you, and that's when I was looking into some of your credits, and I was like, oh, you've written something. That's always a great, from a journalistic point of view, which is where I'm coming from. That's always a great insight to kind of who the person is, and wasn't aware of any of this stuff that happened with you, and it just kind of you just reassess stuff, and you're just like, wow, it's pretty amazing that you were able to get through that period,
Thank you.
But not also that, but just be able to emote it in a way that is understandable and from your point of view, I mean, and what am I trying to say? It's just the way that you were able to open that door and let people into that world and have a deeper insight of what it means to be somebody that survives such a big thing like that.
Thank you. If people want to read it, it's I'm Going to Tell by Laurie Cardille on Amazon. You can get it. It's cheap, and I don't make money on it, and it's really to help people, believe it or not, to help people. And I do speak to universities, too, about it and talk to people. Yeah.
Well,
I'm an activist,
Yeah, that's right. But like even from anyone that's studying psychology or is interested in the psychological insight of the human mind, this book is a bit of a revelation on that side of things. So I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you. I found it deeply fascinating from that point of view.
Oh, thank you.
Highly recommend people get it and support that. And it strangely, as you're right, with the whole Me Too movement, it kind of is a good time to kind of maybe go get that book and have a read of it, because it does kind of open up, as I said, that door a little bit to people that have suffered.
Yeah, and they don't know what's happening because the process is so awful. And, you feel like, oh, my God, like so alone, as I said, and so crazy. And I think that, it's just a book to help people know they're not crazy, and they do know. And there are people like us that survive it and have full lives. And it's really my goal in life is just to help people with, as people help me. Honestly, I don't mean to be like, oh, Lori, I want to be a saint, but it's truly a fulfilling life. Yeah, right. It's a fulfilling life to be awake and present with your own past and, and giving it away to people to help them through there, especially too in America here. I'm really an activist against our president. And, people are yearning for meaning and yearning for connection. And it's just hard to believe it's happening here in America, what's going on. It's just disgusting, really. But I have hope that it's also, maybe it's America's nervous breakdown. Maybe, it has to go through its own thing and get healed. And I think as an individual countries need to go through certain things to really feel their soul again.
I think so. We're all on that kind of path. We've ended up on a very deep note on this, but I think it's a worthy note to address. So, but yeah, I agree. I think there is, you have to reach breaking point in order to reset again. So, yeah. As
Sarah did, and as you're doing, and many people are, and hopefully people who are here could get some hope from it. And that would be right. It's really a pleasure meeting you, honestly. Likewise. I hope to stay in touch with you, okay?
Yeah, and definitely do.
Get to know you.
We'll do. So, thank you so much for your time. I'll just wrap the podcast there, but we'll don't hang up just yet. Okay. But yeah, thank you for taking some time out to chat with us, and do kind of listen to some of the listeners out there. Do listen to further discussions on the George Romero movies as we go through some of his work. We've also got the conclusion of the sectet of Living Dead movies to discuss as well, so stay tuned for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.